Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 138 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So we're trying something a little different here today, or actually a lot different. We have our first non-human guest on the show. So no, I am not interviewing either of my dogs, Daisy and Penny, although that could get interesting. But today I am interviewing ChatGPT. So what is ChatGPT, you ask? Well, I asked it to describe itself briefly in a non-technical way, and this is what it said. Quote, ChatGPT is like a digital helper that can talk and write in a human-like way. It's powered by a type of artificial intelligence, and it can help answer your questions, write emails, tutor in a variety of subjects, translate languages, and even write poetry. It's like having a very knowledgeable friend to help you out with all sorts of tasks. This tool was created by OpenAI, a research group focused on making AI technology that benefits everyone. ChatGPT was first made available to the public in 2021. End quote. So I got to wondering recently whether ChatGPT might have anything useful to say to those of us who are widowed parents. Because if you're anything like me, you're trying to figure out how to raise kids after their other parent has died, and you're realizing that this is hard. And it's hard to know who can even help us figure that out. So this idea came up because a family member of mine actually has a podcast on a totally different topic, and she interviewed ChatGPT on her show. And my dad spotted it, and he said to me, hey, maybe there's something interesting here in relation to your show, too. So I listened to the discussion that my aunt, Ann Barefoot, had with ChatGPT on her show, which is called Barefoot Innovation, and it was totally fascinating. So if you're at all interested in the banking industry, especially FinTech and financial regulation, I highly encourage you to listen to her interview with ChatGPT and to all of her other interviews, actually, as well. But anyway, I started to wonder, what would ChatGPT say to my listeners? If I asked it to suggest resources for widowed parents, would it have anything to say? Would those resources they might suggest be any good? Would it have any advice, let's say, on planning for Father's Day, since that's right around the corner? Would ChatGPT be well-versed on kids' understanding of grief at various ages and developmental stages? And perhaps most importantly, if I posed a bunch of questions and wanted to share them with you on the show, would I have to interject over and over again to let you know where some of its answers were unhelpful or maybe even incorrect or dangerous even? So first I played around a little bit to get a sense of how to use it. And because I was sitting next to my dog when I first signed up, my very first question to ChatGPT was, can you tell me about Tibetan Spaniels? And it told me, by the way, they were smart. So that was fun. I asked a few more questions about some topics that were top of mind, about recovering from this type of shoulder surgery that I had recently, and also about how to clean my new Trex decking because I had spent all day blowing it off and trying to get ready for summer here. And then it was time to think about, okay, what should I ask ChatGPT about widowed parenting? And then give it a go. So have a listen for yourself and let me know what you think about how ChatGPT answers. And before we dive right in, I wanted to make a note about the methodology and technology used in this interview. So I used the most up-to-date version of ChatGPT, which is called GPT-4. And because it only takes text input and then it answers with text replies, I conducted the interview by typing my questions into the question box and then reading the answers myself as they came back. And then in order to be able to share it with you today, I went back and recorded myself reading my questions out loud. And then I also fed ChatGPT's answers into a text-to-speech tool, which is called Natural Reader, the commercial version. And I picked a voice named Aria and chose the friendly option for her tone, which seemed appropriate here. And then I used another AI tool called DALL-E to generate a headshot for today's guest. I had to experiment quite a lot with what types of prompts to give the tool, and you type in plain English what kind of image you're looking for. And then it comes back with some things, and I had to kind of refine that to get the type of image that I wanted, and that was kind of a fun process. So as someone who spent 20 years in tech in my prior life, I have to say this experiment was super interesting. I was blown away with how accurate and useful the answers were to the questions that I posed. I don't think that's necessarily always the case with AI tools, even this one. One of the criticisms, in fact, that I hear, ChatGPT has been in the news all over the place these days. These tools can often create great sounding answers, but they may be entirely wrong. So in this case, I was able to review these answers before sharing them with you. And if any of the answers had been wrong or dangerous, I certainly would have addressed that. I'll have to say, though, I did not change any of the words of my questions or any of the words of the answers. I'm giving it to you today directly as the interview, my inputs and ChatGPT's outputs. So as AI tools become more widespread, I do think it's important for those of us who are working in the grief world to realize that the grieving people that we serve may begin turning to some of these tools for answers. I mean, I think this is still in its infancy, very much so, but I think that the capabilities of ChatGPT from the prior version to this latest version 4 have been huge, and I'm hearing that they're only going to rapidly expand many times over in the future here. So I think it's important that we understand what's out there and what maybe is coming and what the possibilities and the limitations are. I don't think we can afford to ignore AI. For better or for worse, I think it's inevitable that it will change the way we do our work in the world and the way grieving people are looking for answers and what kind of support they get and how we can best serve them in the years to come. So I hope you enjoy my interview with ChatGPT. Support for this podcast comes from BetterHelp. You can talk with a licensed professional therapist online, anytime, anywhere. Visit betterhelp.com/widowedparent to learn more and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/widowedparent. I hope you'll check it out. Hi, ChatGPT. I'm Jenny Lisk, and I host the Widowed Parent podcast. I'd like to do a sort of interview with you today and see if you might have some good information and resources for my listeners. My listeners are widowed parents who are raising their kids and teens after their partners died. I'm glad you're here to talk about this today. Thank you.
Hello, Jenny. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to be of assistance, and I'll do my best to provide valuable information and resources for your listeners. Please feel free to start with your questions.
Great, thank you. Let's start here. Can you recommend some good resources for widowed parents?
Yes, certainly. There are several resources available that can provide support and help for widowed parents. Here are a few. 1. The National Widowers Organization. This organization provides resources and support for men who have lost their spouses or life partners. They offer articles, resources, and a blog on topics related to grief and loss. 2. Widowed Parent. This organization offers resources specifically for parents who have lost a spouse and are raising children on their own. They provide links to books, websites, and organizations that can help. 3. Soaring Spirits International. This is a non-profit organization that provides peer-based support communities for people who are grieving. They have specific resources for widowed parents. 4. The Dougie Center. They provide support in a safe place where children, teens, young adults, and their families grieving a death can share their experiences. 5. Griefnet.org, an internet community of persons dealing with grief, death, and major loss. They have numerous email support groups. 6. Hot Young Widows Club. Despite the somewhat provocative name, this is a supportive community for young widows and widowers. 7. Camp Widow. This is a weekend-long gathering of widowed people from across the country and around the world. 8. Books. There are many books that can provide support and advice for widowed parents. For example, The Single Father, A Dad's Guide to Parenting Without a Partner by Armin Brott, Widow to Widow, Thoughtful, Practical Ideas for Rebuilding Your Life by Genevieve Davis Ginsburg, or Option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. 9. Online communities. There are many online communities and forums where widowed parents can share their experiences and support each other, such as the subreddit r/widowers on Reddit, or various Facebook groups for widowed parents. 10. Professional help. Don't forget about seeking professional help if needed. Therapists and counselors, particularly those specialized in grief and loss, can provide essential support during this challenging time. Remember that every individual's journey with grief is unique. What works for one person may not work for another. It's important to explore different resources and find what feels most supportive to you.
Those are some great resources, thank you. I'm glad to see that you mentioned my friends at the Dougie Center and Soaring Spirits, Camp Widow, and Widowed Parent among those that you mentioned. Can you also please recommend some good podcasts for widowed parents?
Absolutely. There are several podcasts out there that may provide comfort, advice, and the sense of a supportive community for widowed parents. Here are a few suggestions. 1. The Widowed Parent Podcast, hosted by you, Jenny Lisk. This podcast provides a great resource for widowed parents and their families. With a variety of topics covered and guest speakers, it's a must-listen for anyone navigating this difficult life change. 2. Terrible, Thanks for Asking, hosted by Nora McInerney, who is herself a widow. This podcast tackles difficult conversations about pain, grief, and loss with honesty and humor. 3. Grief Out Loud. This is produced by the Dougie Center and offers personal stories and insights about dealing with grief and loss. 4. The Life After Loss Podcast. This podcast by Darcy Lang highlights inspiring people who have moved forward from life's difficult moments, including widows and widowers. 5. Widow Walking Forward. Host Lisa Joy provides insights into her journey as a widow and offers support and advice for others in the same situation. 6. Widow We Do Now. This podcast follows the experiences of two widowed friends as they navigate their paths through grief, telling their stories with honesty and humor. 7. Grief Unveiled. Hosted by Sarah Nannon, a widowed mother and grief coach, this podcast explores the transformative journey of grief, providing insights and tools to navigate the process. Remember, everyone's journey through grief is different. What resonates with one person might not with another, so it can be helpful to sample different podcasts to see which ones resonate most with you.
Great list, thank you. Some of my listeners find it helpful to read memoirs written by fellow widowed parents. Can you please suggest a few we should consider and tell us a little bit about each of them?
Absolutely, memoirs can be an excellent way to connect with others who have experienced similar situations. Here are a few memoirs written by widowed parents that could provide comfort, understanding, and insight. 1. The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. This powerful memoir explores the year following the death of Didion's husband, John Gregory Dunn. It's a raw and honest portrayal of grief and its effects. 2. Option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. After the sudden death of her husband, Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg struggled with overwhelming grief and isolation. The book explores how she coped with her loss and learned to find joy again, offering valuable advice and insight for anyone dealing with grief. 3. The Light of the World, a memoir by Elizabeth Alexander. Alexander, a poet, reflects on the sudden death of her husband and the way that her life changed afterwards. It's a beautiful exploration of love, loss, and the moments of light that appear even in the darkest times. 4. Widow's Walk, One Woman's Spiritual and Emotional Journey to a New Life by Marion Fontana. This memoir tells the story of a woman who lost her firefighter husband in the 9/11 attacks. She shares her journey of grief, healing, and how she managed to create a new life for herself and her son. 5. The Long Goodbye, a memoir by Megan O'Rourke. O'Rourke's memoir deals with the loss of her mother, but it's a poignant exploration of grief that many widowed parents might find relatable and comforting. 6. A Widow's Story, a memoir by Joyce Carol Oates. This memoir captures the struggle of sudden widowhood in the aftermath of the author's husband's unexpected death. Though Oates doesn't have children, her intense and honest exploration of grief may still resonate with many widowed parents. 7. Once More We Saw Stars by Jason Green, a heartbreaking yet hopeful memoir about life after the loss of a child. This story also involves navigating grief as a parent and partner. These books offer different perspectives on loss, grief, and the journey to finding new meaning and purpose after the death of a spouse. They may provide solace and a sense of understanding for your listeners.
Great, thank you. While we're on the topic of grief memoirs, can you tell us how bibliotherapy can be helpful for grieving people?
Absolutely, bibliotherapy, or therapeutic reading, can be a very helpful tool for those who are grieving. It involves the reading of specific texts with the purpose of healing. Here's how it can be beneficial. 1. Understanding grief. Reading about other people's experiences with loss can help grieving individuals understand that what they're feeling is normal and expected. It can help to normalize the wide range of emotions that come with grief. 2. Connection. Grief can often feel isolating. Reading others' experiences can provide a sense of connection, reducing feelings of loneliness and alienation. 3. Catharsis. Reading about loss and grief can often bring about a cathartic emotional release. It can provide a safe space to experience and let go of pent-up emotions. 4. Coping strategies. Books, especially self-help books and memoirs, can offer a variety of coping strategies. Seeing how others have navigated their grief can provide practical ideas for managing one's own loss. 5. Hope. Reading about others who have experienced loss and have found a way to move forward can provide hope, showing that it's possible to find meaning and purpose again after loss. 6. Encourages reflection. Reading about others' experiences and emotions can encourage personal reflection, which is a crucial part of the healing process. It can help individuals to process their feelings and come to terms with their loss. 7. Distraction. Sometimes, the act of reading can provide a temporary distraction from the intensity of grief, offering a respite that can be very beneficial. 8. Education. Certain books can educate about the grieving process, which can be especially helpful for those who are experiencing it for the first time. It's worth noting that while bibliotherapy can be a powerful tool, it's not a substitute for professional help when needed. Those experiencing particularly intense or prolonged grief should reach out to a mental health professional.
Thank you. Let's switch gears a bit. My listeners are raising kids, babies, through college age. Can you please help us understand what to expect from a 3-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 13-year-old, and an 18-year-old in terms of their understanding and processing of grief and death losses?
Children's understanding and processing of grief and death evolve as they grow and mature. Their reactions will depend on their age, emotional maturity, and the support they receive. Here's a general overview of what you might expect at different ages. 3-year-olds. At this age, children don't fully understand the concept of death. They may view death as temporary or reversible, similar to characters in a cartoon. They may ask repeated questions about the deceased, not understanding the permanence of death. At this age, kids often express their grief through play or changes in behavior, such as regression in toilet training or speech. 8-year-olds. By this age, children start to understand the finality of death, but may not fully grasp its universality, that all living things eventually die. They may have lots of questions as they try to understand what happened. They might have worries or fears about others in their life dying. They may have trouble concentrating or changes in school performance. Their grief might be expressed intermittently, like grief bursts, and they might engage in play and normal activities in between. 13-year-olds, preteens and early teens understand death much like adults do. They understand the finality and universality of death. However, they're also dealing with developmental changes and the desire for increased independence, which can influence how they process grief. They may not show their feelings openly or may struggle to talk about their feelings, even though they're likely experiencing a wide range of emotions. Peer relationships become increasingly important at this age, and they might feel different or isolated from their friends due to their loss. 18-year-olds. By late adolescence, individuals fully understand death and have a capacity for abstract thinking that can lead to existential questions about life and death. They are more likely to outwardly express their grief similarly to adults. However, as they are often in a period of transition, such as starting college or a job, a loss can feel like a major setback. They might struggle with navigating these transitions while also dealing with their grief. In all of these stages, it's important to provide age-appropriate support. Open communication, reassurance, and maintaining routines can be beneficial. Professional help, like a grief counselor or support groups, can also be very helpful, especially for older children and teens. It's also crucial to remember that everyone grieves differently and these descriptions are general tendencies, not hard and fast rules.
Thank you. It's really useful for us as widowed parents to understand how different ages and developmental stages come into play here. Okay, here's my next question. Father's Day is coming up in the United States. Can you give us some tips about preparing for this day if our kid's dad has died?
Absolutely, Jenny. Holidays like Father's Day can be particularly challenging for families who have lost a parent. Here are some suggestions for navigating this day. 1. Plan ahead. Talk with your children about Father's Day well in advance. Discuss what they might like to do and how they might like to remember their father. Planning can help reduce anxiety and make the day feel less daunting. 2. Honor their father's memory. Depending on your child's comfort level, consider doing an activity that honors their father. This could be visiting his grave, looking through old photos, or making a scrapbook. You could also do an activity that he enjoyed, like going for a hike or watching a favorite movie. 3. Allow expression of emotions. Encourage your children to express their feelings. It's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to cry. It's also okay if they want to laugh and remember the happy times. Let them know that there's no right or wrong way to feel. 4. Write a letter. Your children might find it therapeutic to write a letter to their father expressing their feelings, thoughts, or things they wish they could tell him. 5. Self-care. Make sure to take care of yourself as well. Your children will be looking to you for support, so it's important that you're taking steps to manage your own grief. 6. Connect with others. Spend the day with supportive friends or family if it feels right. If you're part of a support group for widowed parents or have friends who've also lost a spouse, consider getting together with them. 7. Create a new tradition. If the old traditions feel too painful, consider starting a new one. This could be anything from a special meal to a day out somewhere new. 8. It's okay to have fun. While it's a day of remembrance, it's also okay to have fun. If your children want to have a normal day, that's fine too. Remember that it's okay to have bad days, and it's okay to ask for help if you or your children are struggling. It's important to do what feels right for you and your family.
Thank you. Those are some great tips. I'll also drop a link in the show notes to an article that I wrote for Parent Map entitled 3 Tips for the First Father's Day Without Dad.
That sounds like a wonderful resource, Jenny. Thank you for sharing it. Your work is undoubtedly providing much-needed support and guidance for widowed parents navigating these challenging circumstances. If you have any more questions or if there's anything else you'd like to discuss, please feel free to ask.
All right, let's finish up with a few practical questions. How can I find a grief support program for kids near me? Is there a website where I can search for this?
Yes, there are a few resources available that can help you find grief support programs for children in your area. 1. The Dougy Center, known as the National Center for Grieving Children and Families. The Dougy Center provides a directory of grief support services by U.S. state and also includes some international resources. You can find this on their website. 2. National Alliance for Grieving Children. This organization offers a searchable database of grief support service providers who serve children, teens, and their families. You can find this database on their website. 3. Children's Grief Connection. While based in Minnesota, their website provides links to a number of resources, including a list of bereavement centers across the country. 4. Hospice Foundation of America. Many local hospice organizations provide or can refer you to bereavement support groups in the community, including those specifically for children. Remember to look into each program to make sure it's a good fit for your child's age, personality, and particular needs. It can also be helpful to ask for recommendations from trusted sources, such as your child's pediatrician or a school counselor.
Thank you. Those are great resources. I always end my interviews on the Widowed Parent podcast with this question, so I'll ask the same of you today. If you could say one thing to widowed parents, what would it be?
I would say, please remember that you are doing enough, and you are enough. Losing a partner is an incredibly challenging experience, and raising children through that grief is one of the hardest tasks anyone can undertake. It's natural to worry about whether you're doing the right things for your children, but the fact that you're there for them, loving them and supporting them, means everything. It's okay to have bad days, and it's okay to ask for help. You're not alone, and there are resources and communities out there ready to offer support. Be patient and kind to yourself, and remember to take care of your own needs as well. Your strength and resilience are tremendous.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is ChatGPT, who is an artificial intelligence tool, not a real human, although it has given us some really great and useful information in this interview. ChatGPT, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny. It was a pleasure to provide information and resources for your important and meaningful work. I'm here to help anytime you or your listeners have more questions or need further support. Keep up the amazing work with the Widowed Parent podcast. You're making a real difference in people's lives.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with ChatGPT as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 138. And if you're finding the Widowed Parent podcast helpful, please consider supporting the show. It's easy. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. That's buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. As always, thank you for listening. And until next week, remember, you've got this.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.